The first sign was not the wine, it was the laughter. You know, if I were to write the definitive history of a kingdom's decay, that's exactly how I'd begin. Imagine me as a cynical court historian, quietly observing the slow, glittering rot of royal decadence. I'm the one who notices when men who have literally never read a single book are suddenly dismantling the arguments of our greatest philosophers right in the market square. I see children mocking priests with terrifyingly elegant logic. I watch a beggar outside the royal mint calmly explaining the intricate nature of sovereignty to a totally bewildered tax collector. And it's only after all of this deeply unsettling, completely honored wisdom that the mysterious barrels of wine finally arrive. This eerie little scenario perfectly sets the dark, gothic fantasy tone for our explainer today. We're diving into a very specific kind of folklore, one where miracles absolutely do happen, but they rot the very foundation of society from the inside out. In this explainer, we are not looking at simple, mindless monsters that you just slay with a sword. No, we are examining Zagan, the alchemist of lies. Traditionally listed as the 61st spirit of the Ars Goetia folklore, Zagan is a figure whose very domains of transformation and counterfeit value make him an incredibly potent tool for dark fantasy world building. Speaking from my vantage point as our resident cynical historian, I can tell you he is the ultimate literary archetype for institutional decay. He's the entity that shows up at the exact moment rulers decide to prioritize convenience over truth and decadence over duty. All right, moving right along to our first section, The Alchemist of Lies, subtitled Sovereignty Joined to Administration. To truly use a figure like Zagan in your narrative craft, we absolutely have to understand what kind of entity we're dealing with, and it starts with how he rules. Zagan holds a really unusual double title in the folklore. He's described as both a great king and a president. Now, in the context of dark fantasy or political intrigue, that isn't just a bit of fun trivia. It is a massive storytelling hook. Think about it. A king represents absolute, untouchable sovereign command. But a president, that implies administration. It implies bureaucracy, calculation, systems. Zagan isn't just some courtly noble issuing vague decrees from a golden throne. He represents a terrifying paradox where royal authority and bureaucratic administration are working together flawlessly. He is the systemic nature of corruption, where the destruction of your kingdom's soul isn't an accident. It's properly filed, stamped, and approved in triplicate by the ruling class. He is the unchanged organizational nature of private loss, where every single thing you lose is systematically filed off, titled under the name of God, and transferred to the account of another king's son under the cover of loanworthiness. Let's look at his traditional profile to see his specific domains. He transforms wine, water, and blood. And crucially, he turns base metals into the official coin of the dominion that metal belongs to. He's also said to make fools wise and give people incredible wit. Every single one of these domains connects him directly to alchemy, deception, and most importantly, unstable value. A cynical historian like myself would quickly observe that Zagan doesn't actually give you something for nothing. He just changes the category of what you already have, completely obscuring its true origin and its true cost. Let's head into our next section, From Beast to Courtier, with the subtitle, The Evolution of Appetite. To really grasp how Zagan operates, we have to look at how he visually manifests, because his physical transformation is a perfect mirror for the insidious, creeping nature of institutional corruption. Notice the sequence of his forms here. Zagan's very first appearance is a bull. Now, a bull is essentially weight made visible, right? It represents raw earthly power, agriculture, and pure, stubborn appetite. But after a time, the folklore says he assumes human shape. And when he becomes human, he suddenly gains the power of speech, social performance, negotiation, and wit. This is such a profound metaphor for storytelling. It tells us that civilization doesn't actually erase appetite, not at all. It just teaches that appetite how to speak, how to negotiate, and how to smile politely at a royal banquet. The beast is still absolutely there. It's just wearing a very expensive scholar's robe now. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer contradiction of his initial form. He's a bull, yes, but he has griffin wings.
Griffin wings symbolize nobility, guardianship, and celestial elevation. By attaching these noble, lofty wings to a heavy, earthly beast, we end up with a truly terrifying contradiction. It's heavy, stubborn power that can fly, but isn't gentle in the slightest. It's pure instinct and raw hunger given a heraldic, socially acceptable frame. Your kingdom is actively being devoured, but the beast doing the devouring literally bears the royal seal of approval.
That brings us to Section 3, The Alchemy of Value, subtitled The Danger of Useful Miracles.
This is the core of Zagan's threat. It's not physical violence. It's economic and moral corruption achieved through magical means. So let me pose this central moral paradox to you. If Zagan turns a pile of worthless scrap metal into perfectly minted official currency, who is actually being deceived? Is it the king who gladly accepts this fraudulent wealth into his treasury? Is it the desperate people who spend it just to buy bread? Or is it the society as a whole, which had already collectively agreed that value could be magically created merely by stamping a symbol onto a piece of metal? This is why Zagan belongs in modern tales. He fits perfectly into stories about inflated markets, forged currency, miracle branding, and the terrifying realization that our entire economic system kind of relies on a shared illusion.
The crucial point here is this. Zagan's real threat is that his transformations are genuinely, undeniably useful. Look, a villain who just rides in and burns down your crops is easy to rally an army against. But Zagan, he can turn a horrific famine into a literal feast. He can turn base copper into the gold your kingdom desperately needs to fund a vital war. The miracle works. The starving city gets fed. But because this sudden prosperity comes from an untrustworthy, demonic source, it leaves power without any ethical direction whatsoever. It fundamentally changes the meaning of everything it touches. A kingdom saved by Zagan's magic is a kingdom that has entirely lost its soul, having happily traded its integrity for mere convenience.
Section 4, Counterfeit Wisdom and Wit, subtitled The Charisma of Emptiness. You see, this corruption of value doesn't just stop at the heavy iron doors of the royal treasury. It bleeds directly into the realm of intellect, culture, and social status. According to his character dossier, Zagan acts as a patron of what the source calls counterfeit enlightenment. He possesses that deeply dangerous charisma of people who can make complete emptiness appear incredibly valuable. He's the voice that makes absolute nonsense sound clever, simply because the audience desperately wants to believe they're in the presence of a genius. Imagine watching in sheer horror as total fools are suddenly praised as profound philosophers just because Zagan has given them a silver tongue that completely bypasses their lack of a moral compass.
And who does he target? He doesn't go after the virtuous hero directly. No, he targets the very infrastructure of society. Rulers seeking easy solutions, treasurers frantically trying to balance impossible debts, failed scholars desperate for a scrap of recognition, hungry cities willing to eat literally anything, and people who are absolutely desperate to be seen as wise. He preys entirely on pride and necessity. He makes corruption look like prosperity, and he makes base, ugly greed look like a grand destiny. He is, without a doubt, the ultimate enabler of royal decadence.
Section 5, Building Corrupt Fancy Worlds, subtitled Writing the Convenient Villain. So, how do we build these concepts into actionable tools for writers and world builders? Well, here are some incredibly compelling narrative hooks directly derived from Zagan's domains. Take the Mint of Miracles. A collapsing kingdom's economy is miraculously revived by Zagan's coins, but spending this demonic money literally alters the moral values of the citizens. Or what about Blood into Wine? A besieged, starving city throws a grand festival to celebrate a miraculous new vintage, totally blissfully unaware of the horrifying, bloody source that was transformed to fill their cups. Or The Fool Made Wise, a ridiculed scholar suddenly wins every single argument at court, but suffers the deep psychological horror of realizing he cannot tell if his brilliant thoughts are actually his own or just the whispers of a demon. This is the steep ethical price of wisdom from a corrupt source. Look closely at the hook called The Bull That Learned to Smile. This perfectly captures the gothic, alchemical horror of Zagan. A monster manages to assume human form and is welcomed with open arms into royal high society.
But the true horror of the story isn't that the charming courtier was once a beast. No. The horror is how quickly polite society realizes he's a monster, but decides they actually prefer the beast, so long as he maintains human manners and keeps the kingdom incredibly wealthy. It's the ultimate damning indictment of a corrupt court.
The visual aesthetic for a story like this should feel incredibly rich, but fundamentally unclean. Picture antique gold, deep oxblood red wine, cold black iron, and smoke gray parchment. The beauty comes entirely from transformation, not from purity. And honestly, nothing captures this aesthetic better than this chilling quote from the source material. A mysterious scholar bows to a decadent king and says, "Majesty, I have not made you rich. I have only taught your poverty how to speak in gold." It's an illusion of wealth, masking a profound, terminal emptiness. Which brings us to our ultimate thematic takeaway as we wrap up this explainer. A villain who only destroys is easy to reject. The true danger, the entity that truly collapses institutions and corrupts entire worlds, is the one who makes corruption look exactly like prosperity. Zagan is the spirit of a very, very uncomfortable question. Look at your own life, your own society, or the stories you write, and ask yourself, what if the miracle actually works, but it changes the meaning of everything it touches? What hidden, terrifying price are you paying for a perfectly convenient transformation? Think about that the next time someone offers you an easy way out.